Okay. My name is, when you start rolling, let me know.
It's going.
Is that a good enough introduction, you think?
Yeah.
Sure.
Did you tape that?
Yeah.
Can you see Rosalie too?
Yeah.
We ought to get together slow enough so she can, if she's on the internet, she's not gonna be happy.
She's on it.
Okay. Am I in and out, not too?
Yep. You're both there. Go ahead, you can talk.
Okay, this is a commentary on the Kuehl family background. The Kuehls are related to a young fellow by the name of Mike Brown.
Is that right?
And
I don't think I was around.
my name is Carl, the Honorable Carl Kuehl, and my honorable wife Rosalie is sitting beside me. As far as the Kuehl family is concerned, I can give you a little background. In the 1980s,
1980.
in the 1880s, sometime, my grandfather Kuehl, August Kuehl, and grandmother Johanna Kuehl came over to this country with 3 or 4 small children. And my father was the youngest. His name was Herman. And he had a sister Bertha and a brother Carl, both of whom died before I was born. And my grandfather Kuehl died a year before I was born. I was born in 1906. But my grandmother Kuehl, she died till I was about 9 or 10 years old. And my mother's side of the family, her parents came over to this country in about the same time, in 1880s, as children, and she came over as the youngest of 3 children, 3 girls. And they moved to Wausau, Wisconsin, whereas my Kuehl grandparents moved to Two Rivers, Wisconsin. And my mother grew up there, and she met my dad, who worked for the Chicago Northwestern Railroad at a little town of Edgar, Wisconsin, which is north of Wausau. And she met him that way. And when she left her job, she was chief telephone operator in Wausau. And when they married, they moved to Two Rivers because my grandfather was in ill health, and I suppose my dad wanted to be nearby. So after they went to Manitowoc first, which is a neighboring town, and then my dad got transferred to Two Rivers. And that's where the family grew up, see. Family stayed there, and my father and mother both lived their remaining life there. And Rosalie can tell her side of the family, but I don't know if she knows very much about it, except that her family was Scotch-Irish one, and probably some of it goes back to colonial days, see.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Her mother's maiden name was Gray. And I don't know if you know much about your father, because her father was an orphan.
No, my father didn't even know anything about his
He was an orphan. He grew up in an orphanage. See?
When I was a kid in grade school, he discovered his brother
Oh, really?
and sister. And we got all dressed up and went down to Pittsburgh and to visit them and introduce ourselves to them.
Well, then, of course, and my father died in 1931, just during the Depression. That put a financial burden on the family, because he had 30 years service with the railroad, and none of us, I just got out of school for a year and a half and laid off and so forth. And
How old was he then when he died?
Huh?
How old was he when he died, do you know?
He was 55.
What did he die from?
He had a duodenal ulcer. burst and he died of peritonitis. They didn't have penicillin in those days, see.
Right.
And then my mother died of a stroke in 1964. No, 1940. 1940. She was 63 years old. My mother was a year younger than my dad, about. And my dad's birthday was on Halloween. That was the thing we always were proud of.
October 31st.
Yeah, that was his birthday. And of course, and I had on our family I had a brother John and a sister Alice, which was your grandmother.
Right.
And brother John died 2 years ago, 3 years ago, in this next fall, 1992. He was 81. Just 2 years from his birthday, 82nd birthday. Two weeks from his 82nd birthday. And he died of lack of nutrition. He had a bile duct blockage, and they discovered it too late. Well, he was 81 years old, and the doctor didn't want to operate because he was down to 90 pounds weight, and he was a little tall, about a year height, but thin as a rail. And I talked to the nurses at the hospital, and they said, well, we recognized he had a problem, but we didn't call in the doctor right away because we kept, he must have been sent to the doctor, but he was there trying to do it with medication, and it got, geez, the last time I visited him before he died was a week before he died, see. He could hardly talk. His mouth would go and little squeaks come out, see. Well, anyway, of course, 81 years is a pretty good, I suppose, when you live in an institution like that, you just as soon be dead at it when you're 81 years old. He's been there in that institution. I think he was about 26 when he went there. So he was there quite a long while.
Why did he go to the institution?
Well, first they sent him to the state hospital at Oshkosh. There was a state mental hospital. They couldn't do anything for him. And what he had was really a, what do you call it, Mommy?
No, forget.
What a common,
Like a nervous breakdown?
huh?
A nervous breakdown?
No, he had,
No,
what kids get sometimes. It's a
my
mental
memory.
disorder that just develops in time, see?
Uh-huh.
It isn't a nervous breakdown, it's just something in the genes. See?
So he was okay when he was growing up.
Oh,
So
he didn't get, my mother put him there in about, when he was 26 years old, he went to the doctor couldn't do anything for him, and she was afraid to live with him, see?
What were his symptoms?
Huh?
What were his symptoms?
Well, he'd get violent at times, see?
Like
And then he'd get despondent, do nothing, then he'd get violent.
Like schizophrenic?
Yeah, schizophrenia.
Okay.
And when we went to the hospital with my mother to visit him, and John was in like behind some removable gate, and he was looking out at us. And when I got there, I told my mother, "Boy, if he isn't crazy now, he's gonna go crazy in this place." I tell you, confined like that. He had a little cell where we visited him, and then the last time I visited him there, he was in a straitjacket. He just sat there, didn't respond to anything. But then he couldn't do anything for him at the state hospital, and they sent him back to the Manawha County Hospital, who had just gotten a new management, and your folks were living there. Your folks were living there then in Manawha. And they did a lot of good for John. They brought John so he acted like a human being again, see? And he was that way, and he was under medication, of course. But we'd go and visit him and take him out to eat and take him for a ride every time we went. And since we were in Arizona, I always stopped there on the way, either way, one way or another, see, to see how he was. But when he got so bad, when I saw him that time, they told me the surgeon didn't want to take the risk. He said he's in such poor health. So just passed. We visited him shortly after we got No, they called me. It was in early September. And his health wasn't good. So I told Rosalie, let's go over this weekend and see him, or right after Sunday weekend. So we did. We stayed a couple of days with a friend, and didn't look good to me. The first day he couldn't talk. His mouth would go, and he couldn't talk. Couldn't make any sound. In the morning. So he came back in the afternoon after he had some lunch. Or they had a little vial, a glass of juice or something with him all the time, so he could sip it a little something. So in the afternoon he got back. He could answer. He could make a sound. See? So we thought, well, so we went home. About a week later, they called me and said he'd passed away.
Did he, how did he like living there? Do you know?
How did he like it?
Or what was his attitude?
I don't
about
No,
it?
Well, it was his home.
So
yeah,
he adjusted.
he would walk all over the place, you know.
It was his home. He was familiar with it, and when we come back from a ride or something, he was glad to get back home again. See?
Mhm.
He was uncomfortable away from there very long, which was all right.
Yeah.
And he'd been there for so many years that all the workers knew him, you know, and
Yep.
he would just,
And then they had the funeral services. They had a little chapel in the hospital. And of course, we had a Two Rivers Funeral Company director, and it was all he paid for his own. He had enough estate. See, he had something set aside and in trust in one of the local banks or trust fund, so that he had enough money
To cover it.
for cover his funeral expenses. And I told the funeral director, I just nothing fancy, but see what you can do, and if it isn't enough, I'll pay the difference. But they had enough, see? And he had some money in a hospital bank. They have a banking system, which was money he got from Social Security allowances, see?
Right.
And he wasn't using it. He'd use 50 cents a day or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, and when it all ended up, there was I was kind of a cashier. They sent me the money that was left over, and it amounted to over $1,200 or so. 30. So I sent half of it to Alice, and I kept half of it. That was it.
So tell us,
Well, that's the end of that episode. Now,
tell us what you remember about growing up in Two Rivers.
growing up in Two Rivers.
Yeah. Like
Well-
fun things you did. Did you go sledding and stuff?
I was born in Manitowoc when my dad was working there, and
What'd
a
your
year or
dad
so
do?
after I was born, he got transferred to Two Rivers. So I grew up in Two Rivers. Went to high school there, graduated from high school in 1924. And Rosalie graduated from Butler, Pennsylvania High School in 1924.
What line of work was your dad in?
My dad was a railroad agent for the Chicago North. He started out as a telegraph operator and became the railroad agent in the and he had been working for the railroad for 30 years when he died.
Did you
And
guys,
Huh?
did you get to go on train trips?
Oh
Because he
yeah,
worked
we had
for rail-
passes. Any traveling I did to school was on a pass. See, on the railroad.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Sure, I've had a family pass. You know, he'd get me a pass, and we took one or two family vacations. My dad never got a vacation, you know. He just took a weekend, see,
Uh-huh.
or took snitch the day once in a while. Yeah, they didn't have vacations then.
no.
No, so he just would take a weekend and take like Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And a couple of times we went out to Elmwood, Wisconsin on a railroad, which is a day trip almost. As Elmwood, Wisconsin is not too far from St. Paul, Minnesota, see, in that area.
Where did you go to school?
Who?
You.
I went to Marquette the first year.
Where,
Then I stayed out of school one year to earn some money.
where is Marquette?
Milwaukee.
Okay.
You hear Marquette basketball team, I always had a good basketball. They would beat everybody, even Wisconsin. They beat them. It's a Catholic school, but it was all right as far as I went there because my cousin Emma and Alma were in Milwaukee. They were daughters of my father's only sister, who died early in life, see. And they were brought up
By their father?
by their father.
Did you
Wait a
stay?
minute. I forget what their family name was. I don't know who their father was. I just can't remember. Because I always referred to them by their married name, see. They were married about the time I was conscious of them, see.
Oh, okay.
They were like 16 years older than I was or something like that.
Okay. Did you stay with them then when you were?
Huh?
Did you stay with them when you were at college?
Yeah, when I was in university, I stayed at one of them, and I paid room rent,
Right.
and I got my $6 a week for room and board. Well, they had an extra room. It didn't cost them anything, room-wise, and it helped pay for the grocery bill.
Sure.
And then I stayed out a year, and I worked in the aluminum plant one in Two Rivers spinning coffee pots. Piecework.
Mm-hmm.
$5.06 a day to maximum.
Wow.
When your piecework added up to $5.06 a day, you quit. You quit making coffee pots, see? And a lot of times, as I got proficient, and I'd be done at 3:30 in the afternoon, see? So I just wander around the plant for a while and go back and spin a few more and wander some more on a spinning lathe, see?
This is while you were in college?
No, I stayed out a year. I saved enough money in high school for the first year, and then I ran out of money. Oh, and then I went to MIT summer school. I was going to just to find out what it was like. It was too damn expensive. $500 tuition or something for the summer, and that was just. I left high school to go to Marquette with about $750. And tuition was $110 a semester. So you can see, and I earned my keep pretty much while I was there at the other sister of our other cousin, I mean, Alma. One was Emma and one was Alma. Alma's husband and Carl Lauber. Wait a minute now. Their name was Lauber. Their mother married a Lauber. I don't know if you remember the Lauber.
I don't think
You were
so.
a little kid then.
Do they live in?
They lived around the corner from us, and Lauber married my father's sister, and had these two girls. And the mother died in childbirth or something like that, and a second kid. Then he married a Schramm girl from Manitowoc, and he had one son, Carl Lauber. Then she died in childbirth. Then he married Emma Mandel, I guess her name, a farm girl, and they had two daughters. Both are dead now. They're those daughters. But Carl Lauber and a husband of Alma Lauber had a printed string business. You know. Printed string, they make string out of, they glue threads together and make a tape and dry it. And then they print some store name on the tape. You've seen it, they tie for time fancy.
Oh.
Well, they made and they paid me 35 cents an hour or something like that. I'd go up after class 3 or 4 days a week and do a little odd job like they bought their spools, their cardboard spools knocked down, and I would assemble them, see? Or I would run the tape machines, the printing machine. They had a machine where they'd print the name on the tape. Quite fast. I was surprised. That thing ran about 100 feet, more than that. 500 feet a minute or something like that.
Oh, wow, you can make a lot of tape in a short period of
Yeah,
time.
well, it was right. And that's why I earned some money that way. My keep. But one mistake I made, I bought a Harley Davidson motorcycle. I didn't want to wait for streetcars. I lived where I lived was about 3 miles from the university, see? So I thought, I'm going to buy me a motorcycle. Well, I didn't have it very long, got too darn cold. So Thanksgiving, I put on my long underwear and rode it to Two Rivers. Left it there. And told my dad he can have it and sell it if he wants and get what he can for it. I never had it happen. It was a mistake, but it was one of those things, you know. And I managed after I got rid of the motorcycle. I managed on the streetcars all right. But and then after I worked that year at Tour, I saved up $1,100. I remember, and I paid room and board a little bit each week. See. And I spent very little. Then I went to the University of Wisconsin for 3 years. Graduated in chemical engineering.
So when you said you spent one summer going to MIT in
Yeah, and then
Cambridge,
after that, well, that summer. But after graduate, I asked my dad if he could loan me another because I was out of money then. See. Loan me $500. I want to try at MIT and get some. I was interested in food technology, see, and they had a course in food technology, only one I knew about. So I went there.
That's the MIT at Cambridge, Massachusetts?
Yeah, in 1924. 29. I graduated in 29 instead of 28 because I stayed out of school one year. And in October 29, I had the stock market crash. And everything was blue. sad stuff. And I thought, I thought to myself, I better get me a job before there aren't any jobs, see. So I answered an inquiry in a Boston paper for a certain tea product, had an ad in the paper for a chemical engineer. And I went and interviewed him on Christmas vacation, and I wasn't sure. I thought, that's involved with the building industry, and if we have a depression, there ain't going to be much building going on. So then I just wrote out of the blue, I said, I'm going to write to the Heinz Company. That's what I'm interested in. And by God, that was just a stroke of luck. I got a positive reply right away. Come and see us at Christmas. Well, that's what I did. I saw the two. I saw the Certainteed at Christmas on the way home, and I stopped in Pittsburgh. And they had a fellow that was just quitting in a month or so. He was going to transfer to somewhere in Squibb Company in New York. So I started there at the end of the semester, the 2nd or 3rd of February at Heinz. And I was there 12 years, see. Although I was laid off good part of 1 year. Then I was eating, that was when I was eating 25-cent dinners.
What kind of
year was that?
31 or so.
That was the Depression.
32 was the worst year.
How'd you get by? Were you single then?
Sure.
How'd you get by that year?
Well, you
get by.
You young fellows don't know what tough times are. You never experienced any reversal. And I just was out of school a little while by here. I was thankful that I worked that long. I had saved up a couple $100, but I remember, and then they called me back a couple of times. They had some analysis to do. They were drilling a new well. They had to analyze the water. They gave me that. That was extra work, see, because they laid 3 people off in the lab. Well, that means extra work for those left, see. It was a quality control lab. They have samples coming in all the time. So I did get a little help that way. They gave me a job. I asked the plant superintendent. He said, well, we're going to have grapes coming in pretty soon. He'll give you a job unloading grapes from the refrigerator, 35 cents an hour. Isn't that wonderful?
Let's see what your college education did for you.
Yeah, that was pretty discouraging.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to leave because I had started going to Carnegie Tech Night School on a master's degree in chemistry, and I had 2 years in. So that last third year, I just stuck it out as best I could. But and only time I called for help, asked my mother. One month I didn't have money for room rent. It was $21 a month, and I asked her to send me $25 if she could. She did, of course. But you know, I had the damnedest time getting that $25 when I went to the post office. I really had to get mad at some old bitty woman postal clerk. And I finally said, if you don't cash this thing, I'll go to your postmaster. But I don't know why she would question me, but that burnt the hell out of me. I thought, here I got my address and my mother's name and my name are the same. Why don't you want to cash it?
What was it, a paycheck?
A money order.
Oh, money order. Oh, right.
25 bucks. Of course, those were hard times. You know, everybody was suspicious. And
Yeah, $25 then was probably like $250
Sure.
today.
you could get a darn good meal in a restaurant for 60 cents, I know that. And then they had these white tower hamburger joints, hamburger like that for a nickel.
I used to go over into Pittsburgh in the business district, you know, on my day off and get a lunch for 35 cents.
Jeez.
Well, things were a lot different. Of course, there was a depression. There were a lot of people in hard luck. They were guys who laid off from most of the steel mills were closed. I mean, big steel mills not running, nothing.
That's right.
And these guys, and there was no charity few charity organization, and a lot of guys were selling apples on the street, or sometimes you parked your car. I still had an old Ford. I bought an old Ford Roadster, Model A Roadster before, and that helped me because for a while I did some promotional work on Heinz baby food, and I got mileage on that. I made money on it. Got 20 cents a mile, and it only cost me 18. See? And the other thing was,
Well, that hasn't changed that much because the last time I traveled in my car for the company, I got paid 29 cents a mile. So if you got 20 cents a mile, that's hardly a change at all.
well, it was something like that. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly, but I know I made a little money.
Yeah.
I was glad. I thought, my God, I'm glad I kept that car. But see, gasoline, you could buy gasoline for 15, 18 cents a gallon. Leaded gas, of course. There wasn't anything like unleaded gas
Right.
then. Well, then the other thing was,
So then you
and
where
see,
you
then
work
they,
next then?
yeah, then of course, then when Roosevelt got elected, things started to look up. People had a little confidence then. But it was pretty depressing up till that time. And you know, when he says, I'm telling you, once in a while I go to a movie, and they'd show President Hoover in a Pathé News.
Mm-hmm.
You know what the response was? The whole theater would boo.
Really?
They had no use for it because it wasn't his fault, but he didn't do anything about the depression either. See, he just thought it should be trickle down stuff. See, that's what the difference between Roosevelt. Roosevelt put the money here on the bottom where the people could survive. See, in our work projects of different kinds. See, public works, WPA projects, and things after a year or so of Roosevelt, things looked pretty much, it was encouraging. People had confidence, and I got hired back, see? Business picked up. But that used to be embarrassing. I never booed him, but I thought, Jesus, that's terrible. Booing the president?
Yeah. So then where do you work after Heinz?
Then
Or
I
Heinz.
got a job with
Where was it?
Dow Chemical. In 1942, I didn't care about the Heinz company anymore. I didn't like Pittsburgh. And
When did you meet Rosalie?
Huh?
When did you meet Rosalie?
In Pittsburgh through a friend of mine at the Heinz Company. And he invited me out to their house for dinner one time, and after that was a tricky way of meeting Mary Rosalie, see. I would never have met her otherwise. He played a trick on me.
Did they intend that, or did they?
And how many years have you been married now?
Oh, he got married in 38, 57 years or something like that. It'll be this fall, right?
Yeah.
38 from 95 is 57 years.
Okay. So then you got the job with Dow and moved to.
Yeah, and I got the
Michigan.
job at Dow after finished my year in Carnegie Tech that year. See, it took 3 years of night school to get equivalent of 1 year of day school.
Yeah. So you got the master's degree?
I got a master's degree in chemistry, but I took some other courses too, like some course in metal. I forgot what it was. A metal forming course, see, like spinning and punching and show how they make metal toothpaste tubes and that kind of stuff. All sort of metal forming operation, which was quite interesting. And we had to run some experiments there in the school. And when it was through, I called the professor of that metallurgy course, metal forming course, and I told him I'd like to come up and get my copies of my experiments that I handed in. We had to put them in a folder, regular engineering experiments. And when I met him at Noonar. And he said, by the way, he said, how do you happen to come into this course? And I told him, because he said, I don't see you in any other courses here, see. And I told him I worked at the Heinz Company, and I'm trying to change my occupation, see. That's why I took these courses. And I said, I'd like to get back in the engineering where I started. She said, I got 2 telegrams on my desk here asking for metallurgical engineers from Dow Chemical. He said, why didn't you write to them and see? And I did, and I got a reply from Dow Chemical. See, that's how I started. And I was glad because that get me near home, see. And in Michigan, in a small town.
Was your bachelor's degree in chemistry?
Huh?
Was your bachelor's degree in chemistry?
No, in chemical engineering.
Oh, okay.
No. Wait a minute. That degree, I'm sorry. I got a master's degree in chemistry in 1933 when I was struggling. See, I
Right.
finished it there. Stayed there to struggle. Then later on I figured I'm not getting anywhere with that. Heinz didn't recognize any proficiency that I had acquired thereby. So I said, I'm going to go back to engineering, and I have a natural inclination for mechanical. And so I went out to Carnegie Tech. It took me 4 years because 1 year I didn't go. I mean, we got married, and I thought I got interested in establishing a home, and so I stopped. And it took me 4 years after I started to get that degree, and that's when I went to that metallurgical man, see, and I applied to Heinz or to Dow Chemical, and they no question about it. They said drop in, see, and so we went on. I took my vacation to Wisconsin. And on the way back, we came across the lake, stopped in at Midland, and I had a couple of interviews, and with people, and then also with the man who hired technical help, and established how much I would work for. And we were in home 2 weeks, and I got a telegram, okay.
So what year was that?
42.
42. You remember what you got hired for? How much they offered to
No,
pay?
and I'm not going to tell you either.
No, you're not, okay.
None of your damn business. No, it wasn't very much, but it was a going rate.
Well, we had
I mean,
depression at that time,
I
yeah.
actually went in there. My thinking was influenced by what I got at the Heinz Company, which was less than Dow Chemical paid, but I got a raise every 6 months for 3 years. See?
So that was in 42. Dow was probably,
There was
Pretty
the
busy.
war years, and that 42 and 43, I worked on had charge of making a big project, making magnesium flux by a new process that would go, we would turn out 3 tons an hour. And the other process was putting some dry salts together and mixing them up, and took forever to get a ton. It seemed. So here we developed this. It wasn't my idea, but the head of the lab, and I started experimental work on a little kiln about this long and that diameter. Started on that, to see how it would work, and it worked. Then I went to a bigger one, about 4 foot long and a foot and so in diameter, and got some engineering data off of that. See. And they submitted that to the engineering department then, and then they went out. Those days you couldn't buy anything new. You had to go to salvage yards. They bought a big kiln from DuPont out of the salvage, see? That was the rollers and all for it. And they had we had to have a scrubber tar, because out of that kiln came some acid fumes and moisture too. So we had a big scrubber tar out of wooden scrubber tar with big, oh God, must have been about 10 foot in diameter. Pretty big scrub. And that's where the exit gases went.
what's magnesium flux used
Huh?
for? What is magnesium flux used for?
For when they have magnesium fabrication to make castings, they have a pot of magnesium that's got to be covered, keep the air away, or if she flashes they start the chances of having a fire.
Oh,
So
okay.
they have this magnesium flux which melts, and that's the way we made it. We put in the dry powder and had enough. We had one big burner, an 8-inch and two 6-inch gas burners in that firing net, natural gas.
But what do they use it for? I mean,
Well, it covered to cover the molten magnesium so it isn't
No, I mean-
exposed to air.
okay, but once you create the magnesium flux, what's it used for?
To cover the
cut-
molten
Oh, I'm sorry.
magnesium.
Yeah,
Okay,
just when
okay.
when you're
It's like
using
pouring
when you're
wax.
making fabricating
Right, okay.
things out of magnesium, they dip it. They have men dipping it. I do that's very, but they will quickly run it into a mold. See, but this big bath is
Right.
is a hazard. See, it has to be covered to keep from air. See?
Yeah.
And occasionally they'd have a magnesium fire, and boy,
That's
they
bright.
even have special equipment. You put out a magnesium fire by covering it with. They had an outfit that some form of carbon, fine carbon, and they pumped it. They pumped it, put it through a pump,
The powdered carbon?
powdered carbon, and from that we got the idea how to feed this big kiln. Because when my little outfit, the only way I just let it dribble in and all form an island and float around in there. So then I made something that I had a helper and with a funnel and a plunger, and the air would go punch, and that would shoot it in, see, and melt right away. See? So then from that, one of the fellows said, "Well, gee whiz, that's all we need is that pump that the magnesium departments used to put out fire, see?" And that's work. Boy, we'd have to clean it once, eventually, and we started with a 2-horse motor and then would grind to a halt, see? Then we put a 5-horse motor, even that would grind to a halt, after the, and, but when we put a 10-horse motor on that wasn't, the resistance and the braking power of the stuff that clinging to the sides and the bottom of the housing, see? The impeller was working around, although we had little vanes there, it would still build up and act like a brake.
Yeah.
So where were you guys living? Or when did...
Huh?
Well, you guys live on a kind of a farm now, but when did you guys buy that property?
A year after we moved there, we rented a house on Poseyville. We were lucky too. You couldn't find, we couldn't, when you first came there, we went to a real estate man, he showed us one little dinky house with no bathroom. And he said, and there's another one out on Poseyville Road being built. Well, we went out there and we couldn't see anything being built. We stopped at the corner grocery store where we used to get candy.
Mhm.
And Mrs. Berglight said, well, there's a house next door going to be rented next month. And she said, he works at the post office. So, and she knew of another one way back beyond us on Stewart Road. And I told her, the heck with that, let's get this one first. I went to the post office at 4 o'clock, I had to rent it. For the 1st of August. See?
So you
And
stayed there?
some guys weren't so lucky. We just went the right direction. Some guys had to go to Saginaw to find a place to live because housing was scarce in Midland at that time.
So you stayed there for a year?
Huh?
You stayed there a year?
Yeah, a year. During that time, we looked around, see, to buy. I wanted to get 5 acres and I have our own garden and so forth. And he wasn't going to sell it. Well, he was going to sell it while we were renting it, and I said, "Well, wait a minute here. I just rented it. You give me some notice before you sell it." So he backed down, see. And then when I left it, one of the guys working with me in the chem engineering lab, he rented it for a month or so, a week, a year or so. Well, we were pretty lucky the way things turned out for us in Midland. After a year, we had a 79-acre farm and $4,000 mortgage on it.
Wow.
No, $5,000. I had enough money from my mother's estate, and Rosie's folks give us some money to put down $4,000. And I couldn't get the savings loan bank told me we don't mortgage farm property. So I went to the other bank and he said, well, we don't know you well enough. Well, I said, so then finally the owner said, we'll take the mortgage. And he was an old resident of Midland. And he eventually sold that mortgage to the darn savings and loan that wouldn't give us a mortgage. And we paid it off to that savings and loan, see.
Remember, by that time you had established your credit. And
Well, I didn't have to. They were glad to receive the money. I suppose they held him responsible.
well, that could be too, yeah.
Yeah, he co-signed it or something like that. And with that money that he got for that mortgage, he bought a house in Midland and started renovating it, see. Well, it turned out pretty good. I mean, we didn't have any snags anywhere, see. That was fortunate.
Well, you were raised as a city kid, right?
Huh?
You were raised in the city as a city kid.
Yeah, Two Rivers.
What prompted you to
Well,
buy
in
a farm,
Pittsburgh,
start farming?
in Pittsburgh, we certainly didn't like, I was living in a crowded area in a dormitory, and Rosalie too in a nurse's dormitory. And when we decided to get married, he said, we're going to look for a place out on the edge of town or in a country, see. And we just happened to find one on the very edge of Pittsburgh. On Zane Place. Remember Zane? Rosalie?
She fells.
Remember Zane Place in Pittsburgh?
Yep.
Was a duplex. We had the lower apartment, see? It was a nice place. And Alice Earl visited us there a couple of times. And we lived there for 3.5 years. Then we moved to Midland, see? $47.50 a month rent, which was pretty reasonable, see?
Yeah. Would be today.
You've played your own. And we burned coal at $6 a ton. Deliver it in the basement.
Now you pay what?
$100 a ton. Yeah. I have in Midland. I got to get it. They don't have any coal company anymore there. Got to get it from Saginaw. There's only one in Saginaw handles stoker coal or any kind of. No, there's one in Freeland handles lump coal from some. And it cost me $3 a ton for it to be hauled to Saget. to Midland. And it adds up to $100 a ton.
So in Midland, you farmed then?
Hmm?
Did you farm in Midland?
Oh, sure I did. Until, I don't know just when, but about 10 years ago, I quit making, I made hay on virtually all the property after I retired until about 10 years ago. Then I rented out the bigger portion, 28 acres, and I kept 5 acres or so, 4.5 acres east of the house. And I made hay until, even last year I made it, but it just, the last 2 years I just physically couldn't do it anymore. I mean, I mowed it and it'd be so bushed.
Yeah.
And so I gave my machinery to the fellow that had been buying hay from me. I gave him my hay machine, gave it to him.
Oh.
Well, when I was a kid, you can come over to your farm, you used to have beef cattle,
Oh yeah, we
Yeah.
had Hereford cattle. We had up to 30 head at one time.
and
The young ones, we
Didn't you
raised,
also
had a
have
bull,
chickens?
raised our own.
did you have chickens too?
Yep.
Sure. We even had pigs once a year.
Oh yeah, I remember the pigs, yeah.
One batch of pigs we had. I got 2 little pigs from the neighbor, and he told me they were, one of the male was castrated. And all but one day I looked out there, here some little pigs running around
Oh.
in the wintertime. The no sows. We had a hutch for it, but she delivered right in the wintertime. In that old hutch, so right away we got them in the barn where it was warmer. And I can remember getting the old sow in the barn. I'm pulling on her ears and Rosie pushing on her rear end. You remember that, Mommy?
Yep.
How'd you find time to farm and work full time at the same time? Work it down.
Oh, you just do it. I mean, the
Got up at
weekends.
6 o'clock and milked the
weekends.
cows and,
Well, it didn't have to. I get up at 7.
Mm-hmm.
Rosie get up a little earlier and get breakfast. No, we both got up at 7.
We always
and
got
I'd
up.
be eating my breakfast by 7:20 or so, and then I put my coat on or so and go out, and in 10 minutes I'd have some bales of hay out there for the cows, and I'd go to work, see? 8 o'clock. And in the evening, of course, sometimes it would take longer. On the weekends, I'd haul, in the wintertime, I'd haul, clean the barn, haul manure, and so forth. And then in the spring, I managed.
Worked hard.
We,
Yeah, that's pretty impressive because that's a lot. I mean, that could be a
well,
full-time
I kept
job
me
in
busy.
itself.
I didn't have any idle time, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it contributed to our good health, too.
Mhm.
We had daily exercise of some kind.
Oh yeah.
No, none of it, except occasionally I remember when I'd haul manure in the wintertime. I mean, it was, didn't haul it every weekend. It'd maybe wait 3 weeks before I'd clean out the barn. And I remember Monday I was all right, but Tuesday I had a sore back
Yeah.
from all that pitching.
So did you have vegetable gardens too?
Yeah, we
Yep.
had we had
I did the canning.
about a half an
Yeah.
acre, a garden. And one year we grew half of it in cucumbers. And we sold cucumbers to the pickle company in Saginaw. They had a pickup station in Midland.
Mhm.
You took your cucumbers over there in a bag, and they had a sorting machine. You got so much for this size and so much for that size. So, and the gherkin size, you got more per pound, see?
Mhm.
And I think we made around $200 all that summer work, which was that time. The kids were small, but Rosie and I get up in the morning and pick cucumbers, and I put them in a gunny sack and put them in the trunk of the old Hudson we had, the 1941 Hudson.
Is that the brown one?
Huh?
The brown, was it a brown color?
No, it was a gray. It's a car we brought from Pittsburgh. I don't know maybe if you saw it or not. We had it until I traded it in on a used Hudson about. See, we were there in 42. We had it 9 years, I know. So I must have, and it was a 41. So it must have traded in about 1950, see.
Okay.
6-cylinder. It was a nice car.
Did you have a brownish colored?
Yeah,
Hudson?
we had, and I got a used brown one. And that brown one had didn't have an automatic transmission, but I had an automatic clutch.
That's the one you let me drive once.
Did I? Yeah. It had an automatic clutch.
How's that work?
Let's see. When you, I don't remember how it did work. Do you remember?
Well, it's kind of like, as I remember, it was this summer that Brownie and I spent the
Yeah.
week with you, or 2 weeks, whatever it was.
Couple of weeks, yeah.
And towards the end of that, I'd been driving the tractor for you all
Yeah.
that time. Towards the end of that, you let me drive the car
Up to the store.
up to the store. And the sense I got was it was sort of like freewheeling. You let your foot off the gas and the clutch would disengage. and the
That's
car
right.
would just
That's the way.
coast.
When you put your foot on the gas, the clutch would engage, see? And you leave off, you free wheel, see?
Oh,
The automatic clutch.
that's weird.
And I remember after driving the tractor, when you cut the throttle back on the tractor, it just stopped, you know. And when I let my foot off the gas on your Hudson, it just kept going. It scared me. Seemed like you didn't have any control.
Well, you had a brake.
You put your foot on the brake.
You know, on the tractor, you never had to use the brake, hardly.
No, a tractor will kind of slow down by itself, pretty much. Those are the good old days. I'm glad they're gone, though.
You had a boat at one time, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah, later on, we got a... Is that thing still running?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gee whiz, I'm telling you more than you ought to. I don't tell you all
No,
this
it's
stuff.
good, this is good stuff. You had a boat?
We had a 29.5-foot Chris Craft cruiser. Had 120 horsepower engine in it. And it slept 4.
Yeah, they got that. You got that after we moved to California, because I never.
I think, yeah, we bought it in '58.
Yeah, I never saw
It was
that
a-
boat.
It was a 48 model. It was 10 years old when they bought it. And of course they weren't built, it was one of the first ones built after World War II. See, there weren't any building going on in World War II, they were
Right.
building ships. So it was 10 years old, but it was in pretty good shape, and I got it down in Detroit through a broker down there. And I took a friend of us with us, 2 friends with us, and Paul. Rosalie drove us down in a car. We had that 57 Mercury then, that which we went out to California a couple of
Right.
times. And I remember that we didn't buy the boat when I wanted to, because we wanted to take a trip to California in '57. So I said, there's no use of buying a boat now if we're going to take that trip. So then the next year I bought the boat. See. And we had it until '71 when we sold it. And we had it 13 seasons, see. The last couple summers, we didn't enjoy it too much. You lose some of your courage, see. And I wouldn't go out with that boat unless it was almost smooth. And when you first got it, go out any kind of weather.
You go out on Lake Michigan, is that where you
Lake
went?
Huron mostly. We
Lake
had it in
Huron,
Bay
yeah.
City. Although we had bought it in '59 and '58 and '59, we came all the way over to Two Rivers with it, see. 500-mile trip.
What kind of boat was this? Like a houseboat or?
No, a cabin cruiser.
Okay.
It had a cabin cruiser, but it had a convertible top on it, you know. And that lasted a year or so. The canvas started tearing, so I put a permanent top on it. I made it myself at home and loaded it on our little trailer, drove, and got a guy to help me mount it. And it looked pretty good, nice looking. And Rosie and I made the side curtain. We took the sewing machine over to the boat and made side curtains for it.
You said it was a 28-foot boat?
29 foot,
29.
5 inches. If you had 30 foot, you paid a higher tax, see, state tax. The tax was from 20 or 25 to 30 or something like that. And so everybody made 29.5-foot boats, see. Or 34.5-foot boats, see.
Mm-hmm.
We had that little dining room and little dining area, and
Well, it had a little
we had-
galley and a dining table, and it had arrangements so you could make where the dining could make a bed for two. 2 people slept there, and then we had two berths in the front, in the bow too.
Mhm.
So how long would you go out for? Do you take like 1 week trips or?
Oh, yes, in the summertime.
We'd be gone for two weeks or
weeks.
so for a cruise in summer, up in mostly in the northern part of, during July, see.
Would it have an ice box and a stove and?
It had an ice box, sure. You had to buy ice on the way. And a little alcohol stove.
And a little
And
kitchenette.
it had a little bathroom.
Yeah,
So you take your kids?
Huh?
You take your kids?
yep.
Sure. Until they got older, they didn't want to go. We, see, I retired in '66. So we had about 4 or 5 summers. We went pretty much ourselves. The kids were, Miriam went the last time alone, and I was sorry we ever took her. She was pouting all the way. She didn't want to go, didn't like this and like that. I thought, heck. Next year, we didn't even ask her if she wanted to go. Geez, we just went. And Paul enjoyed it. He made some friends that way on, boating, met some young kids and so forth.
Mhm.
And he has some, and now that he's on his own,
The only bad thing about it was we got 1.5 miles per gallon of gas. So you couldn't go very far without filling up, and we could only, the boat only held 70 gallons, see, 2 35-gallon tanks.
Yeah.
So we could go about 100 miles and that was it.
Did you guys fish or anything?
Sure, we'd fish
Yeah,
whenever there's good fishing. But there are certain ports we'd like to stay, and we stay for several days, at a nice resort area or something like that.
right now Paul has some friends that have a boat, and they take him with them because of his experience and his
Not anymore, Mommy. The guy sold his boat.
Yeah, he recently sold it, I know that. But
Sailboat,
he
a sailboat.
Paul with it quite a while.
So when did you guys buy this house in Arizona?
72.
What made you pick Wickenburg?
We just let here by the nose on our face.
No, we didn't. We stopped at Truth or Consequences, New Mexico first because I thought maybe we could do a little boating there. When we got there, the old Roosevelt Lake was down 20 feet. You could see the water line way down. And the launching ramp was a steep hill, and we stayed there a few days, and it was dusty as dickens. This was in May, dry and dusty.
Oh, yes.
So we thought, I don't like this. So we kept on going, and this was the first thing we ran into that we kind of liked, see? Wickenburg.
We came in the driveway, the roadway out here, and gee, it looks so peaceful and nice and quiet.
Well, the town would look neat and clean, small
Yeah.
town, but nice and neat, no dust and agriculture. See, a lot of these other towns we went through, Safford and Surprise and Globe are mining towns, stinky mining towns, and the vegetation all dead, and here Safford is a big agricultural town, dusty was dusty, the diggers that we drove through there.
Yeah.
So here was a clean little town, nice hills. So
We got out and walked around.
for about an hour. And when he went on, then we asked Uncle Earl about that. He said, yeah, I stop here for lunch occasionally.
They had quite a nice
He was impressed with it too. So on our way back home, we stopped here and looked around some more, and eventually ended up buying a house, a little furnished red stone house, rock house. The walls were about that thick,
Wow.
built out of red rock, see?
Good
When he went
insulation.
around here that I saw like that. But it wasn't very convenient. It was old, so we lived there 5 months or so. In the meantime, we found this place.
Well, we bought this house in town. Well, then I went to church, started going to church, and women's organization met in the homes.
Mhm.
And one of the first places that the women's place met, I was out in the desert. And we hadn't been out in the desert.
Well, they're a couple blocks.
And when
from
I
here.
got home, I said to Carl, I said to this man whose home we were in, I said, would you mind if I'd bring my husband out and let him see what it's like out here?
Uh-huh.
And he said, oh, no. He said, I'd be delighted. So I took Carl out, and that was our introduction to the desert.
And then he came over here and looked at this, well, then we found this house after that. Just by, we had our eye on a lot in the country club. They wanted $8,000 for it. We always used to refer to it as number 8. It was advertised in the paper, and we went and looked at it a couple of times. I told Rosalie, this isn't much of a lot for $8,000. You just barely have room to put a house in the back, little backyard, see? So we didn't do anything. Finally, it disappeared from the paper. So I went to the real estate agency to verify it. He said, yeah, it's been sold. Oh, I said, too bad. He said, well, what are you interested in? And I told him. He said, we just had one listed last Friday. And he told me about this place. Well, we had seen this driving by, and this was just this much of a house then, see?
Oh,
From this, it was built like a trailer,
right.
see? And we noticed that too when he drove by. So he told us where it was. We came up here and liked the view, and boy, oh, we never saw anything like this before. So
Well, it is nice.
you went right back, and I said, come up and show us the house, see? So he came up with us, and we started negotiating that, see? And, I mean, not negotiating. He told me how much the owner wanted, and so then I went over to this friend of Rosalie's and asked him if he'd come over and give us an estimate, see, of what we should ask for or pay for. And he gave me a figure of, with a kind of fraction of $1,000 in it, involved with it. So I said, well, we'll just make it even, see. So I went back to the real estate man, and she said, well, he said, that ain't what they're asking for, but let's see what they'll accept. The guy lived in Lake Havasu City. That was his home, but he used this as an investment or something, and a stopover point. He used to park a trailer. You could see where he parked his trailer. So he wrote in, and 2 weeks later, it was accepted, see?
Wow. So then did you build on?
Then the next fall, when we moved out here, I built this on, see? And then the next year, then I built the carport, additional carport, see? The carport is 2 carports now, see? Built the additional carport and the shop. We needed a shop for storage, see? So by end of '74, it was just as it is now, see?
Did you actually do the labor on it, or did you?
I did most of it. I hired some. One a neighbor here helped me with the timbers to put the post up. And I built the trusses, and Rosalie and I put those up ourselves.
Wow.
And also put the sheeting on the roof. Rosalie and I she helped me lift it up there on the ladder, and I nailed it. And then we hired somebody to put on the roofing, see, the tar paper.
Did you do the stonework too?
Huh?
Did you do the bricklaying or stonework?
No, I had a bricklayer for that, but I was his helper.
Okay.
Yeah, I mixed the concrete, mixed the mortar, and brought the blocks. He even asked. He said, "Why?" I said, he told me. He said, "Why don't you be my helper? It'll save you some money. See, otherwise I got to hire somebody to do it." See, so I thought, okay. He was a good mason too.
Looks like it. Why did your grandparents move out here? Move to the United States? Remember, you said your grandparents moved here
To United States.
to the United States?
United States about in the 1880s sometime.
Do you know why they moved here?
I don't know. Why did the Irish come over in 18? They had the potato famine or something like that, you know. Yeah. Why did any immigrants come over? Somebody told them it was better. Somebody preceded them, see? A lot of my grandfather, Kuehl, had a brother who went to Elmwood, Wisconsin instead of Two Rivers, and started a farm, and he raised a successful family farm there. Big farm. And my grandmother, Kuehl, she had some relatives that went to Brazil instead of here, and she would correspond with them. I can remember as a kid, and then when she died, my mother corresponded once or twice, and that was the end of it, see. We lost track altogether.
Oh, so we have some relatives in Brazil somewhere, huh?
Yeah, some shirt-tail relatives. I think some of the stuff I have in Midland, some old boxes of stuff, there's a letter that refers to that Brazil family, but I'm not, there's no object in me stirring this up. I mean, getting any, as far as I know, they're non-existent, see, but I do remember that part of it.
That's your mother's relative or your father's?
My grandmother's.
Do you know what their name was?
My grandfather and grandmother came to America, but her brother and his family went to South America, Brazil.
Do you know what their name would have
Were they
been?
Keels?
No, I don't know it had to be my grandmother's maiden name, see.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know what it was. All I know is her first name was Johanna.
They from
And that's where Alice got her, Alice Johanna Thiel.
Okay.
Where did they come from? Germany or Austria?
Prussia.
Prussia.
Posen, which is part of Prussia. Posen. And my
What's Prussia?
mother's family came from a part of Bohemia in Austria, which was settled by German people. Part of Bohemia had some German settlements. And there was a little town called Silver Green. Now, I don't remember that, but I remember one of my aunts telling me that. Silver, Silbergruen or something.
So your mother was from Austria, or her folks were from Austria?
Yeah. They spoke what they call High German, a real kind of a pure academic German. My father's spoke Plattdeutsch, which is a slangy German, see? And sometimes you can't quite understand each other because they got some words that, especially the Plattdeutsch, they got a lot of slang words, what would be equivalent to slang words.
Did you learn German?
Sure, I learned German. When I was a kid, that was the language I learned because my grandmother couldn't speak very good English, see? She could speak German with a lot of English words thrown in or the vice versa, see? So I would go and visit her. She lived alone as a kid. When I go down to the depot was only about a mile, half a mile, 3/4 of a mile from where my grandmother, they lived right along the rail, near the rail. They had a 2-acre plot right near the railroad track, and over the railroad track was Lake Michigan. And when I go down the depot, sometimes I go and visit my grandma because she had gherkin pickles. You know, sliced gherkin, they peel cucumbers and pickle in some candy-like liquor, see?
They're good.
Yeah, and good candy, good, tasting good. So I go down there and get lunch sometimes, then we'd play a game of dominoes. I can remember everything. And she enjoyed that. She just have some kid visit her and play dominoes with her. But see, she died before John was very old. He never got that experience. I was about 9 years old, 10 years old when my grandmother died. See,
Okay, that's
I
what
wasn't even that old. I think more like 8.
I was wondering, because I've never heard my mother refer to him.
Oh no, see, Alice was a baby.
How many years younger than you is she?
7?
7. Alice is 7 years younger, and John is 4 years younger.
Okay.
And they had 2 children before that. They both died shortly after birth in Manitowoc, when they lived in Manitowoc. They're buried in our cemetery a lot. But one lived, I think, a week, and the other lived a day or so.
Wow.
And I was the first successful one. And look at me now, see?
Yeah, 88 years.
88 years.
89 this summer.
So did you have a lot of snow in the winter time when you were growing up?
Oh, sure. We still do. In Wisconsin and the Two
Yeah.
Rivers?
Yep.
My goodness.
Even in Pennsylvania, we had lots of snow.
Well, yeah, I enjoyed it too. We used to skate. I even made myself a sail. We skate sail. When some winters the river was frozen smooth, see? No snow on it. Boy, you could sail all over the place, see?
It was
50 miles an hour.
a handheld sail?
Handheld sail. You just hold it like this, and then when you want to turn, you feather it and turn it around this way, see?
Really?
Yeah.
Even in Pennsylvania, you used to shut the schools down because of the heavy snow.
And there are a couple of the wealthier kids, they had sailboats.
Yeah, I
But they made them. They made them themselves. Their father, like the Calmbert kids, they had the Calmbert Marine Engine Company. So they had a machine shop to make parts and all that, and they had the money. They always had a sailboat. And I would ride with them. They were generous. Take a ride with in a little cockpit and back, and boy, you went around sailing, you scare the heck out of you sometimes, the speed you go.
This is ice sailing, right?
Ice boat.
Ice boating.
Ice boats, yeah.
Yeah.
And then one family, the Hamilton family, they built a toboggan slide out of wood, just artificial toboggan slide. And they would let anybody, they would have had the toboggan, but they would let anybody come and ride, but they had to supervise it, see. One of the family was there to supervise it. And the way it worked, you had to walk up and pull the toboggan up on a slatted walk up, pitch. Had a lot of slats. And then up there they had a tilt table. You put the toboggan on, and everybody got on the toboggan, and then somebody stood on the end of the tilt table, and down you went. And the toboggan slide had sides on it, of course, and gee, you go right down, go way across the river, see?
Wow, that sounds fun.
You hit some pretty high speeds, I think.
I imagine.
And I remember once I went down the damn thing on my skis. I never did that again. Because when you hit the river, you're not going down, you're going like that. And I just went forward and sprained one of my wrists, see? And I thought, that ain't very smart. I'll never forget that. It sure scared the heck out of me just to hit the bottom like that. And then I had a sore wrist for a while.
They were skis or?
Yeah, on skis, see? And what we did, generally to get going, quite often we'd have to ice it, the toboggan slide. That meant you have to help carry buckets of water. We chop a hole in the ice, carry buckets of water, and start at the top and spill down and spill until you got a coating of ice on the slide. The slide was built like this, see? So these sloping sides to keep you in. And you had to coat the sides in the bottom anyway. Just
Boy, you must have really got going fast.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I spent many a good, and they were pretty generous, and I knew the kid too from the family. And the whole neighborhood would come there in toboggan slides. See? And even his mother would be there sometimes to supervise and make sure. But they just built it, they had the money to do it, the Hamilton family,
Was it at a park or was it their property?
And it wasn't some of their land that they owned along the river, see?
Yeah.
They owned some land behind their property along the river there.
Well, the Hamiltons had a big manufacturing company in Two Rivers, right?
Yeah. It is, I don't know if it's still Hamilton now, but it's owned by, I forget the name of it now, but it's some household equipment company. They make, among other things, they used to make a gas dryer, and they make office furniture, they made drafting room furniture, and they had a steel plant where they made a lot of steel furniture, cabinets, filing cabinets and so forth. And after I left home, they were the first ones to make the gas dryer, or clothes dryer. And this guy who invented the clothes dryer had the idea, he couldn't peddle it to anybody, but finally Hamilton took it up, see? And that was the first clothes dryer, the Hamilton clothes dryer, see? And then everybody copied it.
Yeah, that was a good invention.
When was that invented, the clothes dryer? Do you know what year?
Huh?
Do you know what year that would have been, that they invented a clothes
Oh,
dryer?
gosh, I don't know.
Approximately what?
I don't keep track of that kind of insignificant stuff.
Yeah.
All I remember is Hamilton had it, was the first one, and it probably was maybe in the latter part of the Depression years or something. They were glad to grab onto something like that, see? But that was the first clothes dryer, gas dryer, and they sold quite a few of them, and then they became more or less undesirable because of chance of fire, see?
Right.
A couple of them, the lint box would start burning. But they were a good dryer, though. But yeah, I think the laundry still use a gas fire. They don't use electric dryer because it's cheaper, I think.
You know, we have a gas dryer.
Did you?
Sure we do.
We do right now.
Huh?
We've always had a gas dryer. That's the only kind of dryer we've ever had.
What make is it?
Ours is Kenmore, I think.
Kenmore is
Sears.
the one we have now.
Sears? Well, probably this company made them for Sears. Sears don't make much of anything. You know, they have somebody else make it for them.
Right.
Well, okay, but they're kind of obsolete. You don't see them advertised anymore.
Yeah. Now Rosalie went to nursing school?
Huh?
She went to
She went to
nursing
nursing,
school.
Pennsylvania.
Did you work as a nurse then?
Oh, yeah.
Tell them, Mommy, where did you go to?
Presbyterian Hospital in Pittsburgh.
That's where you worked, or that's where?
That's where I went for training.
Oh. How long did the training take?
3.
3 years?
3 years. Then she worked there for a while, and then she got, during the Depression, they laid some off, so she took home nursing, private nursing. Then finally she got a job at McGee Hospital,
McGee Hospital.
Which
that
is
was
this is a
maternity hospital.
maternity hospital. And
Oh,
that's
really?
where she worked until we got married. See. $100 a month.
So what's a maternity hospital?
It was a maternity hospital, but then the University of Pittsburgh had
They had a unit there for teaching,
for teaching.
a
And that's what I
clinical
supervised.
unit in the hospital for teaching purposes. They had patients there, and the hospital, the university staff would come in with their students and like this is that kind of disease, and this is the way you treat it.
Right.
And all our patients were
Charity patients.
charity patients.
Oh. So you're providing
And the medical
free
and the
service.
medical students came in, and they each one had an assignment of some,
Diagnostic assignment. Try to
and
diagnose it.
so then we'd introduce them to a patient like that they had to have, and they come and do complete histories and physicals on them, and that was their assignment, their class assignment, you see. That's how they got their beginning experience. They were almost first year medical students.
So you were working as a nurse then when you met Carl?
Where,
Yeah, she was working there, and I met her at this. I say this big mistake I made going to dinner with her friends.
me too.
Yeah. How long after that did you guys get married?
Oh, we were going to get. But see, this is the Depression. We wanted to get married, but I told Rosalie, I'm not going to get married until we get some security in a job, see, and some money ahead. Some money ahead. So we went and saved money, both of us, and before we got married, we had rented a house, this duplex, and furnished it. Didn't owe anybody anything, see.
Before you got married?
Before we got married, and then we went and got married, went down to Cumberland, Maryland. You just go in there and say, I want to get married. That's it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, you
Went
go
to
to
the
the court.
preacher's house.
Right.
Wait, went to the, where did we go first? The courthouse.
Yeah.
And there was a taxi guy waiting for us, see? That was a business for some people. It was so he said, I'll wait here for you, he approached us, I remember. He has a way of knowing, just by the way you look. And he said, get your license and I'll wait for you and take you over to the preacher's house. We parked at a lot near there, see? So he took us over to the preacher's house. The preacher's wife was a witness, and we got married, see?
Really?
And then we came out, he took us back to the courthouse. And that's where, in that parking lot, that's where we got he took our wedding picture, remember that?
Yeah. We never.
The taxi driver took our picture, we still have that so only evidence we have
Of your wedding?
a wedding
The only
picture.
record. So how long after you had met was that?
After what?
After you had met? Couple years or?
After you
Got
met,
married in 38, so we met about 1931.
Oh, wow.
Well, this was the
Well, in
Depression.
the
You're
Depression,
talking about the
nobody
Depression.
got married.
Mm.
It wasn't. I got back to work again in the latter part of 33.
I got out of work too.
Rosalie was out of work,
Mhm.
and you started off from scratch, see?
Right.
Five years after I started at the Heinz Company, I was earning what I started with, see? 5 years, and part of those years I earned nothing. One of those years I earned practically nothing. I say, you guys don't know what hard times are, see? I'm glad you don't, because that was,
Yes.
but I think, I mean, if, that's where the central federal government had to come in and do something, see?
So then when you moved to Michigan, were you still working? Did you get a job?
She
working as
quit
a
her
nurse?
job when we got married,
Oh, did she?
yeah, and she just was a housewife in Michigan, did volunteer work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't told her,
What kind of
I
volunteer
s-
work?
huh?
What kind of volunteer work?
Oh, some church work or local, I don't know, not much, but, I told Rosalie, I said, if we're gonna get married, I don't want you to work, I want you to be a homemaker, the hell with it.
Uh-huh.
Whether we're rich or poor, I'd rather have a homemaker home than having to
Right.
go out to work or something like that. Old fashioned, see?
Well, were there many women working at that time?
Oh, sure. Not as many, but, well, first of all, there weren't as many jobs either, see?
Mm-hmm.
Women got more and more into the workforce because there were more and more openings for them, see?
Mm-hmm.
Like in a bank, women, and for a few women in a bank, but they were tellers. You didn't see, now you see them, they're loan officers or vice presidents, right?
Right.
Didn't have anything like that.
Right. Yeah, it seems to me, from what I know of it, that a lot of women started working during World War II to support
That's
the war
when,
effort.
yeah, that's when it started. Like even when I was a Dow, they had, right in the power plant, you know, which is a kind of a dirty place and a lot of noise, they had a lot of women in there reading meters and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, the men were off fighting.
Dow didn't hire very many in the plant, but in places like that where they could read meters, that's where they hired them.
Mhm.
But where I was, where you manipulated a lot of things, equipment or something, they wouldn't hire women for that. They weren't too risky, see.
Mhm. So, Rosalie, what type of work did you do with the church? Do you remember?
Where?
At the church?
Volunteer work.
Volunteer work?
At the church?
Yeah.
And she volunteers now at the museum once a week.
Right.
And when the first few years, we had a fire, see, and they rebuilt the museum, so they called for volunteers 2 weeks or so before opening. They were behind schedule in getting ready. So a lot of local like me went down there. I worked for more than 2 weeks to get things so they could open up. I kept working there for 3-4 years. Well, Rosalie go down, I go down with her, and had little projects going. And then the curator they fired him. The guy who helped bring the museum back to life again. The board of directors thought he was too old-fashioned or something. So they fired him and gave him a $20,000 severance stipend. But he was disappointed, and I was too. I like to work with this guy, see?
Mm-hmm.
And he died the next year. I think just to disappointment. So I never went back there again after that. I thought, the heck with him. See, the board of directors of that museum, everyone is a business person in town.
Mm-hmm.
The motel, a couple of restaurants, they all depend on that museum as a drawing card
Right.
for the museum. And they call the shots.
How's the new director?
Huh?
How do you guys like the new director?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they've had 2 or 3 since, haven't they? Since Harry
Yes.
made him. One lasted a year and he went up to Prescott. He probably couldn't get along with them either, see? He went up to the Prescott Museum.
I go down every Thursday afternoon. Work from 1 to 4.
But you ever meet the director?
No,
Is it a woman or man?
it's a woman.
See? And she sticks in her office pretty much, huh?
Yeah.
And then they have a
She's in
group,
the business office and I'm up on the floor, so I, you know,
and they
I
have
don't get to see her.
they have a group of women called them something is Sonoras or something.
Las Sonoras.
Las Sonoras means the Women's Association or something. And they have get-togethers occasionally, and I told Rose, they want to have a luncheon, $16 lunch, and I said, nothing doing.
Yeah.
$16 for a lunch?
16?
$16, they have a luncheon out at Lost Cab, the big guest ranch out here.
Uh-huh.
For a fundraiser, that's a fundraiser, see?
Right.
And I told her, Rosie, I said, you're doing enough for, at our age, you're doing plenty and long as you've been here, just by going down there once a week.
Yeah.
There are a lot of younger people that can start taking over here. I wish Rosie wouldn't, because she's on her feet a lot, see?
Uh-huh.
For 3 hours.
What do you do there?
I
She shows them
stay in the
pictures.
art gallery.
She shows them this picture and that picture and that picture.
There's lots of
Are
things
you
about,
blind?
there's many things about these paintings that the average person doesn't see just for standing there and looking.
Right.
And like they have one picture called Cowboy's Dream.
Uh-huh.
And it shows a cowboy, you know, laying back on his back,
In the clouds.
and then a cloud in front of him, and then the cloud there's another nude woman.
Oh, really?
Now, if you use your imagination,
And
you can see
they
a
don't
nude women.
see, and the people,
That's the cowboy's dream.
and see, and as the people go through there, it shows a horse was riding, and a nude woman riding a horse. That's what the dream is.
The dream is?
Well, the average person going through there, they don't see that.
Right.
Then they got one house.
So you
Then
stand, you
so
stand
I have to
yeah.
say, so I have to point this out to them, you
She
know.
points out,
And they
oh,
giggle and laugh, and they just. Then they have another one, and it's called the
she
Cowboy.
points out all the pornographic artworks.
Yeah.
And then they have another one, a big painting, a great big painting, with horses riding on the desert.
Uh-huh.
And the lead horse, if you keep your eye on him and then walk a semicircle to the other side, the head turns.
Oh, really?
And they wouldn't see that, you see. So I take them around and show them that, too.
That's great. So, you like working over there, don't you?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And then they have another oil painting and out in the park they have a bronze
Bronze horse.
statue.
Uh-huh.
And it's called Thank God for the Rain.
Mm-hmm.
Called what?
Thank God for the Rain.
Oh.
And it's a man on his knees, you know, praying, and then in the museum we have an oil painting of that,
Mm-hmm.
and we have
That's all since I've been there. They built this park right on the corner. It used to be a gas station. And they bought the place, and it's like an advertising sign for the museum. See, you come along the street, you see this park and a sign, see. Otherwise, people would drive right by, see.
God, why don't we take him down there and just show him the outside?
Well, he can go through it.
The museum.
We don't want to go through it anymore, but you can go down
No,
there.
but the museum isn't open till 1 o'clock, is it?
You can go down later.
This is Saturday. It's open at 10 to 1 and 1 to 4.
Oh, yeah.
It's open from 10 till 4 o'clock.
But it's
Six.
interesting. You see
Yeah.
a lot of things.
Well, I haven't been down there for a while. I haven't been up here for a while.
Well, it's changed. They got a nice mineral exhibit.
Dude,
It looks like you're going into a jewelry store.
really?
Yeah, really. Of course, I don't want to go. I've been in through 2 or 3 times, and Rosie goes every week practically.
Yeah.
But you can go down there. It like I think a $2 fee,
Uh-huh.
and it's worth it too. It takes you about at least an hour to go through. See.
Oh, really?
So if you want to get
You
down,
want
we'll
to
take
go down
you.
this afternoon and look at it.
Do they change it very frequently?
Hmm?
Do they change change
Some
stuff
of the
now?
things they do.
Oh, some, yeah.
Some,
And
like,
then they
they'll
get to
exchange,
do things.
they'll exchange artwork for other museums, once a year, or every other year or something like that.
Right.
It isn't, certain things are permanent though, unique to this museum. But see, when the old one burnt down, they didn't have hardly anything to show anymore.
Yeah.
They had a little tin shed in the back. I went down to look after the fire, see. They had a little metal shed back there that hadn't been burned, but it got awful hot, and there were some boxes of old photographs in there, or old stereopticon things, singed pretty much. But there were some salvageable. It was a hot fire, see. Because these old buildings, they're dry as a bone,
Out here, yeah.
So they put in notices in the paper for the people in the community and the surrounding area to please donate any old stuff. And boy, they got a lot of stuff. Duplicates and everything. They had all kinds of stuff to show again, see, in no time.
Right.